Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Nua Talk. Today we're going to be talking with a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about what makes the best team leaders. My guest is a leadership and performance coach. He's based in Killaloe, County Tipperary, here in Ireland. And to use his own words, he helps leaders slow down in order to have real conversations with their colleagues and clients. He works in the pharmaceutical consumer goods executives to help them build higher performing teams, and he helps them show up as better leaders to create a space to work through their challenges. So, without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Mr. Frank Guy. Frank, how are you today, sir?
I'm great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me along, Mark. Very good to be here. Thank you.
Delighted to have you. Delighted to have you, Frank. So, listen, Frank, let's start off with an easy one, shall we? Tell us a little bit about what your work entails as a coach and what areas do you specialize in?
Okay. I specialize in three areas, really. One is the whole area of actual leadership itself, which is probably what we focus on mostly today. People who have teams, sometimes they're accidental. Suddenly they've been promoted to a position and they're put in charge, we'll say. So that's a big one, how they lead and manage and coach their people. There's another area which is the whole area of influencing people, which is, I see it almost as a pipeline, because you build up a relationship with people, one conversation at a time. And if you do that really well, you can influence them. Or in the selling world, and I work with quite a lot of sales teams, you almost don't have to sell. They will, they'll come to you almost. So that's the second area around influencing, selling and influencing in one way or another. And let's face it, we're all trying to influence every day anyway, not just to customers. And the third area then is in the area of how we cope with ourselves a little bit. How I call it coping effectively. And it's interesting because it's both in life and in work. And there are a lot of leaders, there's a lot of people generally, not just leaders, who really are struggling. And maybe there's too much pressure on them, maybe they're the wrong role, maybe they've just been that accidental leader, and they need to be a bit more self-aware, and they need to start to manage themselves better. And funnily enough, that will weave itself into all of the other discussions I have as a coach with my clients, and they all seem to blend together. So it's a lovely fit, and I love what I do, so I'm very lucky. I love doing that. I love all that work. Thank
Wow,
you.
what a blessing to love what you do. And before we get into the meat of it, Frank, how did you get into this work that you love so much?
Yes, I've had a corporate career, multinational corporate career, going back from college days, and all sorts of roles in that time. I was very lucky. I had many different functional roles, but my last big employer was GlaxoSmithKline, and I was very fortunate in that I found myself in a position in heading up learning and development, sales enablement, that whole area. And along that pathway, I saw an opportunity to take a diploma in coaching, which I grasped and went through with, and very quickly realized that this, when I grow up, this is what I want to do. And that's not so long ago, by the way. But I really felt now I found my niche. And I was also very fortunate, Mark, in terms of Glaxo, because at the time they had a center of excellence for coaching based in London, run by some really, really high profile coaches. And I was able to get further training there after my diploma and become accredited as a coach for GSK, which has stood to me always, I must say. So once when the Glaxo were making a huge organizational change around 2013, and my position in that area, working with both pharmaceutical and consumer goods areas of the business, that position was gone, and that was my ticket to go off and work for myself, which I've been doing now for I've 11 years now, working in my own capacity, which is that's how I got there.
Well, that's a great story. It sounds like you caught the bug, or to coach and help others succeed. And once you caught it, there was no going back to your traditional corporate position. Am I right?
Oh, no going back, Mark. No going back. But I think the fundamentals of it is, and I do a certain amount of training as well, which I love. It's a nice mix to have, because you get a great buzz from working with a group of people in a training capacity. But either way, that in some way or other you're going to help them a bit. You're going to, in the coaching sense, you kind of unblock people. They and you can see them flourish ideally. It's not always because of something that as a coach that I've necessarily done, but it does give them the space to think. That's the beauty of coaching, that they have the space to think. The principle being they have the answers, really, yes. And if I hold myself, in a professional capacity as a coach, then, that they can work it out for themselves, and then the magic happens. So when you have the privilege of helping people and seeing them get on and get through challenges, it doesn't, that's brilliant. I love that. And, that's, I suppose that is why I love it. You're helping people.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like you went through quite a significant transformation yourself. Like, that's a pretty big deal to go from, a high-end corporate role like that to go and working for yourself. So that must have been quite the adjustment for you, Frank. And so when you see others having to go through changes that's ultimately to their benefit, how do you go about doing this? What's your approach to helping leaders in transformation like that?
Well, I think in the first place, you've got to help them. You've got to help them through their anxiety or even fear of change. So you'd have to start challenging their beliefs, which may be self-limiting. And I have worked with a number of people quite recently in terms of where they're breaking through completely out of one industry, say, and into another. But the starting point often is working through with them and creating their own self-awareness, getting them to understand that maybe some of the limiting self-beliefs that they're carrying with themselves are not helpful, and maybe there's not enough evidence for them. And when when you do that, suddenly, the light bulb can come on, and they start to think much more creatively, and more positively, and they will push on. So I think that's probably somewhere in there that would be the right answer to that, I think.
Limiting self-beliefs. That sounds like a pretty tough conversation to have with somebody. So let's unpack that for a little bit, Frank. So you're coaching a senior leader. You notice that they may have a limiting self-belief. How do you approach that conversation without bruising egos, as it were?
The starting point to that is what we call contracting with them. Before you even start working with somebody, you've got to set out the rules that I'm going to abide with, but also the rules that they're going to work to. And for me anyway, one of those ground rules is, look, I'm going to listen to you carefully. I will tell you what I'm hearing from you, but there are times when I'm going to challenge you, and you'll get used to that, particularly after we've had a few sessions together. But be aware that there will be time, and I might be quite hard on you, because I'll say, look, in the example, look, there's I mightn't use the word self-limiting belief. I might just say, what's true about that? What evidence have you got for that? Because whatever way we look at it, the past isn't a good predictor of the future. And if you can challenge the evidence behind that, and they know that I'm going to do that if I need to, but I'm not going to set out to challenge them and be disruptive. But if a client knows that I'm going to be straight up with them, and the trust is there at that stage, then they'll take it. They take it, and for in a very good way.
Wow. So people sign up and ask for this level of psychological punishment that you inflict upon them. No, but it's true. I mean, what kind of people are attracted to coaching that want to be coached? What have you seen?
Oh, well, I suppose some of the clients are actually, maybe they have a leader themselves who feels that they need a leg up. So it mightn't be driven by them. It might be driven by, say, a development plan for 2024, 2025, and they might say, look, I can't give you as much help as you need. Let's bring in an external. And they will give you, and that might be alongside an internal coach as well, by the way. That would happen in the big corporations would have a very strong internal structure, but they might bring in the external, such as myself, in with that.
Yeah.
And that, that's often where it's at. But equally, it could be the other side of it as well. They might say, look, we've got a high potential here. Let's give him a leg up or her a leg up. But equally, then it could be somebody who's really struggling, but they might feel, well, look, he or she is actually, they've got the potential, they've got the talent. We've invested so much in them, we can't lose this person one way or the other. So let's invest a little in them. So I think that's where a lot of the motivation tends to come from.
Yeah. And what kind of results do you see then in your work, Frank? So, in terms of before and after, and I guess that's quite fulfilling work if you see somebody that's making progress, through a coaching process. What does a before and after generally look like?
Well, I suppose the ultimate would be, say, could be CEO, it doesn't really matter. It could be somebody who's leading a significant team, and back to my lead, manage, coach, that they get the balance right. They use each approach differently at the right times, and that team takes off. So that would be the ultimate. In other words, you'd have an empowered, autonomous, self-directed team that would just, I suppose, really, really do well, really perform, really perform well, or perform at their potential anyway.
Yeah.
And that's as good as it gets for a leader. If they can do that, if they can let go, and really put the time in. They've got to put the time in with each individual, and put the time in with the group as a team. Then I think that they can really, effectively, the team should do the work then, not them. They can kind of, if you like, I sometimes use the expression, they can work on the business rather than in the business. They can get out of the trenches, and their team can make things happen.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. And, certainly, in my experience working in big corporates as well, the focus is often on execution. Execute. And it's very hard to lift your head up and kind of going, are we executing in the right direction? So, and in today's world where things shift so fast, and potentially so fundamentally, we often really need to be looking up and thinking, are we going the right direction here? And so to give somebody that kind of space, as I said in the intro, that's a blessing, to give a leader a space to, have that thinking time and to be directed by an expert coach like yourself. That's a blessing to my eyes anyway.
And you mentioned this thing about, the performance and the focus on results and so on, Mark, and I go back to this idea, that I sort of almost use a visual of it. There's sometimes there's times when we wear the hat of a leader. Where are we going? It's all about the why. It's all about the why they're there. Why is the business there? Where it's trying to go, and consistently communicating around that as a leader. But then there's other times when we focus on what they're doing, which is their goals, their objectives, the piece you're thinking of. And I find that very often when you start working with people, that's where the focus is. It's on, it's on the what, okay? But
Yeah.
the third piece of that is how they're working. And the approach there, rather than managing performance, the what, the approach there is very much the coaching approach. And if I can help people to coach, and in some cases train people, I've trained whole teams to coach. It's not that difficult, but if I can train a team to coach, then then that makes the big difference. You can, because then that's where what gives them empowerment, gives them autonomy, and ultimately the combination of all those three, leading, managing, performance, and coaching. That's, you've got a motivated team. Then you've got them fired up, and hopefully they would do their best work.
Fantastic. So if, there's a few people watching live. If you have any questions for Frank, feel free to ask them on LinkedIn. We'll pop them up on the screen. Or even if you're watching this subsequently, if you still ask the question, Frank can still answer the question after the live stream. So I'm sure Frank will be delighted to take questions from anybody now or in the future. One of the things that you mentioned on your website, Frank, is you talk about short-term thinking and this difference between reacting to events rather than responding to events. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, the short-term thinking is relates a bit, Mark, to what I'm saying about people who are sort of down in the detail of the business. Maybe instead of getting up in the helicopter a little bit more as a leader, but also maybe focus too much on results and maybe short-term results, as opposed to somewhat more strategic anyway. So I think that's the first bit. Just remind me of the second part of your question in a second, because I've now distracted myself from that thought.
Yeah, I guess it's somewhat related, because you speak about the difference between reacting to events versus responding to events. So they're similar words. They both begin with "or," but they're quite fundamentally different, right?
They're fundamentally different, because I usually recommend people that they find some kind of a pause button, and it's this area I mentioned at the beginning, about coping effectively. There's stuff coming at us. We can't do anything about it. The biggest classic case, was 2020 when COVID arrived. And you've got to, that's a major event, obviously. But every day, every conversation, every person you might meet, there's something is happening. It could be a phone call or something. And if we just immediately react to that, we're not necessarily going to come out with the best outcome, because we mightn't have thought about what is the best outcome. So I recommend to people that they find some sort of a pause button, because that gives them the chance to the opportunity to think about, what does this event really mean? What does COVID mean? Is this forever, or is this a temporary thing? And that's beliefs again. What do we choose to believe about what's just happened or is happening right now? And if we make those choices, and we think, if you like, calmly, especially calmly about them, and say, well, okay, so if that's what it really means, then how should I now respond to get the very best outcome? And it's not just really challenging events. It can be really good events too. But if we don't hit our pause button in some way, then we're not necessarily going to get the best out of it. Yeah. And I think everybody can think of examples where businesses. I'm always thinking of the hospitality industry. There's some amazing examples of people who've hit that pause button and actually have come out of it really, really well, and have created whole new opportunities and have reinvented themselves. And that's, for me, that's wonderful. So
amazing. Yeah, I suppose in high tension situations, and as you say, everybody can think of work, critical conversations that perhaps we got wrong or right along the way. But if we get triggered, the amygdala can get hijacked, and we can respond in a way that may not be the best thing for anybody around, including ourselves. So finding the awareness to press that pause button in terms of not reacting and responding is the sign of a very emotionally mature professional. Would that be fair to say? Yeah. Okay. So, Frank,
which again, yeah. Mark, goes back. No, sorry. Yeah. Go.
I think the line has let us down a little bit there. Okay, let's move on from that one. I think the point's been made really nicely. One of the slides that you shared with me in advance of our conversation today is, I think it's probably a training slide, and I'll add it here to the stream. You call it Finding, Binding, Minding. Can you tell us a bit more about what this is, Frank?
Yes, this is I suppose this is the selling and influencing bit. If I was working with a sales team and so on, but it isn't just a sales team. It can be anybody looking at trying to get business. So for me, this is like a funnel. People call it the sales pipeline. They call it the sales funnel. And it's, working from the top there is, where do you get your new clients from? Where do you get your new customers from? Which in some cases is, getting out there and physically networking, which would be always my preference. I love meeting people, but it can be, there are lots of other alternatives to that. If you're doing that, but each of those is a conversation. It's always about building relationships. That's where it fits in, that you're constantly building each relationship one step at a time. So you meet somebody at a network event, and then maybe you think, well, okay, do you know what? It would be really interesting to follow that up there and go and have a coffee and a cream cake with them. It's a great way of meeting people. And that's the level there in that model, if you like, of, okay, there's somebody really who I could help. And it's very much about them, not me. There's somebody I could help their business. I could help them get customers. I could help them lead a team better. And then at that point, then you can sit down with them and actually, the next level of that is actually maybe putting a proposal together. Say, well, look, what about we engage in a 8 coaching sessions over a period of some months. Or you may get to a point where you negotiate, you present to a group in some businesses, up to the point where you then get to a point where you're actually buying. You're binding, you're binding in with your customer. You found your customer, now you're binding in. So that's the idea of that, where you actually get to supply your goods or your service. And then, of course, the whole customer management piece, managing the relationship and not just stopping there is absolutely vital, because then you can grow the business. Having started with one bit of business, you can grow it from there. And for me, there's the other side, of course, is that you can actually put numbers to all of that. That's over on the other side of that diagram. You can put numbers to it, and that's where we mentioned earlier about targets, KPIs, and so on. For me, though, it's ultimately all of those things, whether it's presenting, networking, how to do that. Some people, they really find it very hard. Negotiating, they're all conversations, one way or the other. And they're all based, for me, on a lot of them is the success comes from asking really good questions and listening like hell, listening like we've never listened before. And if you do that, then you can build a relationship. You can, you're changing conversations, you're listening, asking more, you're asking less, listening more, building a relationship, and results come from that. And that's something I would always advocate.
Fabulous. And let me just pull that down. I love that, Frank. So ask really good questions and listen like hell, and that's where results come from. I think mostly we don't hear things that succinctly and put and so simply put. So sometimes the message, when they're so simple, they kind of catch you a little bit off guard. It's like, oh, how do most of your clients respond when they hear such profound but simple advice?
Well, but maybe it goes back to your lovely question about challenging people in the first place. It's often maybe at an event if I'm speaking or one to one with a group you say, well, who was taught how to ask good questions at school or college or wherever they went?
Yeah.
And it's very rare that somebody would put their hand up, frankly,
Yeah.
And secondly, okay, so who was told how to listen properly?
Yeah.
And as a coach, that's the basic skills of coaching, is asking the really good question. And I only allow 6 questions when I help people. There's just 6 questions. That's it. You can keep it simple. You use that word simple, and then listen in a way that we don't listen in, I'm going to say, in life as well as work.
Yeah.
And it's with a really deep attention. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting, but
Yeah.
it's so valuable. And I
But
think
isn't it? Yeah.
that brings a different quality to a conversation, and that's what
Yeah.
builds relationships.
Yeah. Isn't it lovely though to come out of a conversation and feel like the other person is a great listener? You feel heard. It is a very unique gift that some people have. These skills that you talk about, I mean, obviously you're teaching them, but in your experience, do you think on occasion, folks are born with these skills, or or it comes more naturally to people, or is this very difficult for some people to pick up skills like active listening, emotional intelligence?
Um, I I think there are naturals. We probably can all think of a natural, somebody who's just an amazing listener, who is not distracted by anything else, only yourself when they're listening to you. That said, you can definitely learn it. Um, am I good at it? I think I'm getting better. I've been at it for years. So every day is a learning day. I still ask questions that aren't the right one.
Hmm.
They're not one of those top 6 questions, and there are times, frankly, when I wouldn't be listening as closely as I should and with as much attention. But definitely we can all learn it, definitely, without any question. And it's not that difficult. It
Yeah.
really isn't that difficult, but it does take a long time. We are changing the habits of a lifetime when we do this,
Yeah.
literally.
It's like growing a new muscle or something like that. It feels awkward at first, but then you kind of get used to it. All right, cool. So, what is this slide here all about, Frank? Can you help us explain this?
Yeah, I put that together because I think it's really important for leaders. Let's go back to what I was mentioning earlier on, the accidental leader. They're suddenly promoted and they think, oh, I'm in charge now. And maybe they think, well, this is command and control. It's my way now. Okay.
Yeah.
But actually, this is an org chart upside down. But I think it's the right way up. I think this is the way it should be. Your customer or consumer right at the top. Your salespeople, if they happen to be a sales team, are right at the forefront of it, if they happen to be. But anyway, the main thing is that those are the people, say, in this example, in this model here, of who are doing the selling and the influencing, building customer relationships. But the 3 bits there in the middle are the types of conversations which that leader should be having with each of those, which each of their team, individually, spending time with them, really investing in each individual and also as a team at certain intervals. So they're leading conversations, they're managing performance conversations, and they're coaching conversations. And they're all a little bit different, all very easy. They're not that difficult to do, but they're very different. And each is appropriate at different times. And if your best leader, go back to your title, your best leader are the people that get that mix right. And that org chart is that way up because it's about supporting that team. And if we, as a leader, if we support each member of that team, they will flourish and our job is done. That's what it's all about. It's about helping and supporting our team to do their best work, as opposed to the way an org chart is more normally drawn, we'll say.
I think a lot of traditional leaders would look at this and spit out their coffee, um, because they feel they're the titular head of the group, and you will follow them like the Pied Piper. So this is again a fundamental psychology shift for
Yeah.
leaders to kind of see that they're at the bottom of the chain in a way, and that their sellers and their clients are at the front. Um, that's really quite profound, Frank. And
And if I
how
might,
do your clients react to this?
yeah, I mean, it can be a real light bulb moment, Mark. It really
Yeah,
can be, and I've had people react to that in extremely, now I get it. Now I know what I'm supposed to be doing. It's
yeah,
not about me; it's about them. But there's another piece to it as well, which is also really useful, which is that we as leaders also need to be looking for the support of the person that we report to. And in some cases, if you're a CEO, that could be your board. And we
yeah.
should be demanding that support. We should be demanding the time with them. So
Okay.
that's the other side of that, which is very
Yeah.
useful as well.
Mhm. So, Frank, we're coming close to time here. It goes really fast. Where does 30 minutes go? Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close out the conversation?
Um, I suppose one thing I say to an awful lot of people, Mark, is be selfish. As whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, be selfish about your own professional development. It's for life. It's lifelong opportunity to learn and develop ourselves. And we're not, and I have direct experience of this myself. We're not selfish enough. There's one person that needs to look after our professional development, and that's us, and
Yeah.
that's our responsibility. So we really need to grasp that, and maybe some part of that is saying, well, actually, I'd like to get a coach. I'd like to get somebody to support me and help me as well as
Yeah.
you. You're doing a great job as my leader, but I'd like some more support. And I think that could change somebody's life and work.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I often recommend friends and colleagues to invest in coaching, and they think that it's somehow the responsibility of the organization that they work for to invest in them. And if you're lucky enough for that to happen, fantastic. If you're not, I love how you separated the word there, responsibility. You said responsibility, that you have the ability to respond. But
Yeah,
any investment that you make in yourself is a lifelong investment, and you'll get the great results from your own investment in yourself for the rest of your life. So and I've had a number of conversations with you, Frank, and I can certainly attest to the fact that you do ask great questions. You're extremely observant and a great listener, and I would certainly highly recommend you as a coach to anybody that might be watching this or listening to this on Spotify somewhere down the line. Thanks for taking
thank
the
you.
time out to chat today, Frank, and we'll talk to you soon. And thanks
A
everybody for
pleasure.
listening.
Thank you. Real privilege. Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Cheers.